morning, everyone. My name is Thalia Vrachopoulos. I am the curator of this lovely exhibition. I will take you around to see it today and tell you a little bit about the artist. This particular artist is Hoyoon Shin Hoyoon in Korean. He is originally from Gwangju, South Korea. I have been exhibiting his works for approximately 14 years now. I have exhibited his works in New York, in Athens, in Thessaloniki, in many, many places around the world. I really love his work. It's about the essence or materiality and the void, which is part of a Buddhist philosophy, and it shows in his works, particularly when you look at the solid parts next to the empty parts, which is the void, right? So that is the Buddhist philosophy. However, lately, he's exhibiting signs of making hybrids. By that I say that he is mixing Eastern culture, Eastern philosophy, Eurasian philosophy with Western philosophy. Okay, here we have the Venus De Milo, missing her arms. If you look at the work this way, it is very much about emptiness and fullness. And if you look at it this way, it looks very, very solid. That is one of the charms of his work. And he is a unique in this kind of working methods, because this is 3D cutting and 3D design, which he started 20 years ago, 18 years ago, and that was unheard of at the time. Now, some other people are copying him, but he is the original of this kind of work. Here we have Hercules. Hercules is the Greek hero, the originary hero of Greek culture, and Hercules beat down, went through the 9 trials and came out the winner, as you see. So he's leaning on his bat, and he's looking sideways, and it shows us the beauty of the Hellenistic style, and that's why the musculature is very much emphasized, and he's standing in a way that shows us the contrapposto of the typical classical Greece of the previous century. Can we move on a little bit? Another one of our wonderful artists is Hwang Ran. Hwang Ran is also a Korean artist from the area of Gwangju originally, but Hwang Ran has also become very, very famous. She's represented by a gallery in Switzerland, as a matter of fact, and her work is all about the essence of things also, like Hoyoon's, and emptiness and solidity. And so that's why we see the pins and the paper buttons that we see here. She has worked with paper buttons because this is a paper exhibition. We say it's a paper exhibition, we mean that it is works that are three-dimensional or almost three-dimensional like this, that come away from the wall and that are made of paper, which is a very unique kind of exhibition in the world. So she uses paper buttons and pins to create her beautiful plum blossoms here that you see at the top. And there is a beautiful Korean temple in the background that you see here, and you only see part of it. So it's just a fragment of the whole large picture, which would have been the whole temple with all the details, etc., etc. Now, when Ran Hong exhibits this work, she exhibits it with all the pieces together so that you can see the actual large temple and with the plum blossoms above it. Now, Ran Hong has been influenced. She graduated from SVA, and also she went to the Fashion Institute of Technology, and she had studied fashion before she started doing this kind of work. And you could see that because of the pins and the buttons. But these are paper. Thank you. And Desmond Magani is a Greek artist, actually, but she lives in New York. And I'm going to show you her books. She is also connected to Korea. She has exhibited at the Gwangju City Museum of Art. She has exhibited in Gwangju. And this is her grandfather's story, her family story. Her family story, that's her grandfather there, who was in 1919, was in the war with the Turkish army when they were against the Greeks, and there was the war, the Venezuelan War, and so he was in the cavalry. So he escaped through very difficult methods, and you could see the wires there of the immigrants and of the pogroms that they had undergone under the Turkish nationalist government. So this is the story of her family. This is the work by Vincent Parisot and Irini Linardaki, who produced this work of art that sort of refers back to the 17th century Dutch dress code that sort of put forward the idea that the richer you were, the more prosperous you were, the larger your collar was. So that Linardaki and Parisot had created this work to refer to that idea, but they've made it a kind of contributory work with the audience, so that if children come in here, for example, they can go underneath and put their heads through the top and make believe that they are also of that same class. This is a site-specific installation, what we consider a site-specific installation. Is the work by Maria Karametou. Maria Karametou is a Greek-American artist who lives in Washington, D.C. She teaches at George Mason University, and she works a lot on themes of feminism and themes of repatriation, immigration, acculturation. And we see here one of the themes that I just mentioned about women, right? So if you look at this image, there is a drawing of a woman laying eggs into the nest. You see the little eggs here, right? And the lace over here in the home. She's protected, in other words, and she's laying her eggs in her home. And it's of course a tongue-in-cheek reference to the idea of women's expectation about women, that they should stay home and have children and be locked up in the house, in other words. So this is one of her wonderful works. I'd like to take you to the next gallery now. Anasazi is an artist also from Philadelphia, the United States, but she's of Greek origin. And her work is comprised, as you can see, of pages from novels and books that are about women, usually, and you could see that she has torn out the pages and used them as a kind of continuous reading or continuous book. The work of George Gatsos talks to us about the crookedness of politics, right? So that if you read about it, this is all paper, by the way. It's all paper and it's burned in certain areas so that you can realize that it looks like a little bit like garbage. And what George is trying to say with this comment is that that the words of the politicians are just so much garbage. And this is about the double talk that we get as the public who is fed these many lies by the politicians. So it looks a lot like garbage. And Marigot Cassi's work is paper also, and it is comprised of forms that appear to be, that reference rather, birds or birds in flight or something flying which is free. And the way I have hung the works of art, they are away from the wall and they're not tacked down to the wall because I want them to have the freedom of birds. And it's a very kind of delicate paper fabric in the background and paper that is glued on top of it, and then paper knit over here that shows us this idea of flight. That's what these works are about. The works of Polenaki are very interesting in that they are love letters whose envelopes we see collaged here on this very large work. She has saved them over many years, and these are the actual letters that reference Astrid here from a father to a daughter, from various relatives back and forth. There's a lot of maybe tears here. You can read it as family letters. I know that when I went to the United States from Greece as a little girl of 9 years old, I really cherished my grandmother's and my grandfather's and my father's letters that came very often. And if I didn't hear from them for about 10 days, I started worrying. And at that time, we really didn't have the telephones or the means that we have today to pick up and call our relatives and say, how are you? Are you well? And so this worrying quality was always embedded in this kind of communication. Let's go to Insu Shin. Insu Shin. Shin Insu is a Korean artist who works with paper that she makes herself out of hanji paper. But then it's not enough for her to make hanji paper and embed the whites in between in the black paper, which is a very difficult thing to do, by the way. But her work also utilizes metal. And in fact, she loves it when the metal becomes rusted. And I know a lot of my Korean friends understand the philosophy behind the rust or the roughness or taking advantage of or offsetting or highlighting the roughness of a given material. Now, we have the work of Eleni Milonas. Eleni Milonas did this foot that we see here out of newspapers that are cut up and collaged into this work of art. And if you read about it, it's about women and gender, but it's also about missiles and war and like African American guns. So this is about the theme of the show, which is in itself the paper moon. Which means that it's taken from this old Greek song, Paper Moon, Hartino to Feggaraki in Greek, that speaks about illusions, right? Now, so the idea of illusion can be seen in this whole exhibition, in the works of this whole exhibition, because it is embodied in the works themselves. For example, we have here the works of Longbin Chen. And Longbin Chen created the Buddha and Guanyin out of books. So if you see the books, they're Chinese books. And this one is about nature, and this one is about artist biographies. So he has cut up the artist biographies to create this carved work of the Buddhas. Now, the idea of the Buddha is self-evident, so I don't have to go into it again. And so we have this idea of the nirvana and the finding of nirvana through a series of steps that are not always predictable. This is the work of an Islamic artist. Her name is Roya Ameng, and Roya Ameng talks about, in this particular work, discusses the plight of the Arab in the United States, and she utilizes the historic illuminated manuscripts as a kind of reference in her works. From the Quran, for example, here about Allah and the flight, the holy flight in the 7th century. It is held together with threads that are barely able to hang together, just like the position of the Islamic peoples in many of the countries of the world where they are thought as dangerous, even though they might be just plain old family people. So she's an artist trying to stay in the United States. So she is working very hard and hoping that they're going to grant her a visa to be able to keep working in the United States. Here we have another Korean artist. Her name is Gahae Park. Gahae Park, or Park Gahae, utilizes cutouts, and she cuts out the work, as you can see here, and creates it that way. First of all, to reference music, right? Musical notes. They are like musical notes. But then also she likes the idea, and I do too, of the way the shadows are created. The shadows that are that reference another world. In other words, the illusion that we refer to in the exhibition itself. The work that you see there is by a Chinese artist by the name of Shin Song. Shin Song creates works out of cutout paper, and she has done many public projects in New York. She's originally from China, and she is considered one of the finest artists in New York, in the New York scene. She has had many important exhibitions, and as you can see, her work is all about, again, that illusion of a different dimension that we talked about before. So look at get a good picture of the shadows there, Mr. Park. This is the work of Bill Pangburn. And Bill Pangburn does work about water. Water, and as we can see, water floating from an airplane. If you look down from an airplane, you look at the river, for example, the ribbons of water go like this. That is what his work is about. He is one of the best, I would say, woodcutters, woodcut workers, or printmakers that are around at this, during this time. And again, his work is about dark and light, and again about illusion, because when you look at the river from an airplane, you get many different illusions. And above all, this exhibition is about illusion. That is the work of his wife, Renee Magnanti. Renee Magnanti's work is about women's place in life in general. Mostly the Aboriginals or tribes that are outside of mainstream Western culture, so that we can have, for example, certain designs from African tribes, or we can have from Australian tribes, and you have usually about women. Now you can walk around this because it's two-sided, and you could also see the beautiful back. Take a look at the back, it's beautiful. And it's about women and their work. And it is made by a hand loom. Okay, a hand loom is something that our grandmother, great-grandmothers used to use to make work, so to make rugs for the home or fabrics for the home, and you can do it by hand like this. And so she did it entirely by hand, and she made it to be two-sided because she wants to refer to the idea of the paper moon illusion, of how politicians tell us one thing and they mean something else, and then they do something completely different. This is Lumei. Lumei is one of the wonderful Chinese artists that live in New York. And this can be read as the road that is uphill all the way. But also this one here is not only the road that is uphill, but also the tower, right? Maybe the Empire State Building or one of the towers that fell in 2001. John Giordano, I believe you have interviewed her, made the work called She Said, He Said, and of course, if we're talking about Hillary Clinton, she said, and if we're talking about Trump, he said, it's all about they said, and they actually did the opposite or didn't do anything at all and took advantage of the people as usual. So that the newspapers on the bottom are all about that idea of the political two-sidedness that we have had to live with. This particular top of the piece, we do not change the world, she says, when we whisper. We change it by roaring, by yelling, and we say we have a right to exist as women and do, not stay in the home if we don't want to, and have the right to our bodies, and et cetera, as women. And that's what that piece is about. And her work is about double talk. Again, it refers exactly to the idea of the exhibition, double talk. And it's called a clear message, actually, clear message. And she's kind of making a pun on the idea of how politicians do not give us clear messages, but rather tell us one thing and do another. So this is created out of light, neon light, and beautiful paper that is see-through. And I brought Tina to Korea before because I curated the Incheon Biennale. I was the foreign curator for the Incheon Women's Biennale, and she was part of it. She came to Korea actually, and she loved it. This is an abstract work, actually, by Konstantinos Stanapiou, a Greek artist who lives in New York, lives and works in New York, and has exhibited in many, many places in New York, and has been written about by such critical bodies as Jonathan Goodman in Sculpture magazine, and so he's quite well known, and it's about the complexity of words. And so again, he's addressing directly the idea of the exhibition. Many of these artists actually created the works for this exhibition, for the idea of this exhibition, the concept. This is Rosena Gopian. She also created this particular work for us, for the Paper Moon exhibition. Now this artist, this is all paper. She usually makes this kind of work in a very large dimension, and she utilizes the fabric usually, but she this time made it with political cutouts from newspapers, for example, 1968 here, which was some riots in Paris and all over, actually in Greece also, and she creates it with paper and with thread, and it also refers to women's work and how sewing is seen as women's work. Mary Ting is another one of our wonderful artists, and Mary Ting comes from New York. She is a very dedicated ecology expert, and I should say expert, she lives and breathes the protection of animals, and so you could see that by her work, where you have nature and animals, you have frogs and various other birds that are dying or in the throes of death, that are in danger, and these are endangered in works that have been pieced and are hanging as if they are pieces of meat, as a matter of fact. And she's kind of referencing the idea of the protection of animals, ecology, and the protection of the ecology of the world, and the killing of animals just for the idea of making ashtrays out of their hands, just like they're doing with the gorillas in Africa. So she is very much for protecting nature and the ecology. Let's continue. Christopher Dongeris is a photographer. He's from Greece, but he has exhibited widely, including New York, and his works reference the idea of cutting up and putting back together. In other words, the words that we are given through our television and our public media are scrambled and then put back together in the way a lot of times that the media wants them to be put forward. so that we never really get a straight answer about anything, but that we get fragments of things. And this is very much about the fragmentation that is going on. Okay, I think we have one more, but it's not ready yet because the exhibition is not completely finished, by Lydia Vigneri. And Lydia Vigneri is an artist from New York. You can, I don't know if you can see puppets here. The puppets, she has made puppets out of, what, angels and a king, and the puppet theater is a very important idea in Greek culture. When I was a child growing up here, actually, my brother, whenever he wanted to entertain me, to stop me from carrying on, he would put a tablecloth on the table, and he would get under the table, and he would take these puppets. This is Greek pastime. He would take these puppets of Turkish. The puppets were made with Turkish generals and a poor family, a little boy, and it used to always was a tongue-in-cheek about the Turks, right? And he used to make fun, and he used to make me laugh. He used to make me laugh like that. He used to do the puppets under the table. So this is a national pastime. I think most cultures have something that relates to puppet theater, and with that, I think Paper Moon is a wonderful exhibition about a subject that is very much on the minds of everyone right now. What are we going to do in the future? How are we going to save our world? How are we going to become better human beings? How are we going to help our future generations to become productive and to stay healthy? And all of these ideas are very much on our minds because of the such dangers that are looming right now in our midst. One more thing before we leave today, Mr. Kwok, is that I want to mention that Crete is a fantastic place. It has always been one of the wealthiest islands of Greece because it has production. It has a lot of production. Produces a lot of fruits, a lot of vegetables, a lot of olives, and a lot of other things. However, in the recent time, and it used to produce, it had a very big paper industry. But no longer, that is no longer true. Although we have the rough material, in other words, we have the trees, the berry trees, mulberry trees, that are everywhere evident in Crete. We don't have the infrastructure anymore since the economic crisis in Greece. So when I invited the Hanji team from Jeonju to do the fashion show for us, I'm kind of hoping that they might be able to work together or to work something out together and help each other, because we have the rough material and they have the infrastructure. So I'm hoping this will be the case. Thank you very much. Bye.